The first time Imara realized that stepmother truly wanted a gun was not during the shouting that rattled the walls of their aging family house every other night. It was not when Celeste slapped a bowl from her hands and accused her of disrespect in front of the servants. It was not even when she quietly sold Amara's late mother's necklaces and pretended thieves had taken them. No. The moment Amara understood the depth of that hatred came on a suffocating evening when storm clouds covered the village sky, and Celeste stood near the doorway, smiling like someone hiding poison behind her teeth. A girl should learn to obey the future chosen for her, she said softly, while folding a stack of clothes that did not belong to her. Amara was 19 then, too young to recognize manipulation quickly, too hopeful to believe cruelty could live comfortably inside someone who smiled so often in public. Her father Emmanuel sat nearby, exhausted and silent, staring into a cup of tea that had gone cold long ago. Before grief hollowed him out, he had once been respected across 3 provinces. Traders greeted him with admiration. Children chased after his truck whenever he returned from the city with imported goods. But after Amara's mother died from a sudden fever, something inside him collapsed quietly. Celeste entered their lives less than a year later, beautiful, intelligent, charming enough to fool an entire community. At first, she behaved like a blessing. She cooked elaborate meals. She cleaned the house until it gleamed. She comforted Emmanuel publicly, while neighbors praised her kindness. But behind closed doors, she studied the house like a conqueror, examining occupied territory. Slowly, she erased every trace of the woman who came before her. The framed wedding photos disappeared first. Then the old curtains Amara's mother had sewn by hand. Then the music. Then the laughter. By the second year, even the servants lowered their voices whenever Celeste entered the room. Amara learned to survive through silence. She stopped arguing, stopped defending herself, stopped expecting kindness. But silence changes people. It bends their backs. It teaches fear to grow roots in the chest. That night, after Celeste mentioned the future, Amara followed her father into the kitchen. What does she mean? She whispered. Emmanuel refused to look at her. It is nothing. Father, his shoulders sagged heavily. There is a man from Kitala village. Amara felt cold immediately. Everyone knew Kitala village. Remote, poor, forgotten by the rest of the country. Most young people left if they could. The ones who stayed were usually old farmers or widowers with no family left. What man? She asked quietly. Emmanuel rubbed his forehead as though the words physically hurt him. His name is Gideon. How old is he? Silence. Father, 58. The room seemed to tilt beneath her feet. Outside, thunder rolled across the hills. You promised me I would continue school. Emmanuel finally looked at her, and the shame in his eyes frightened her more than the answer itself. Business has been failing. We owe money. Celeste says this marriage will help us survive. Celeste says? The bitterness escaped before she could stop it. At that exact moment, Celeste appeared in the doorway, elegant even in the dim yellow light. She leaned against the frame with calm satisfaction. A respectable man is offering security, she said. Most girls would be grateful. He is older than you, Amara replied. Celeste's smile tightened. And yet he can still provide. Emmanuel said nothing. That silence broke something inside Amara forever. Over the following weeks, preparations moved quickly. Too quickly. Celeste controlled everything: the dress, the date, the guests. She even spread rumors throughout the community that Amara had begged for the marriage because she was desperate to become a wife. Every lie isolated her further. Some neighbors pitied her quietly, but nobody challenged Celeste openly. People feared women like her because they understood something dangerous hid beneath her polished manners. One afternoon, Amara overheard Celeste speaking to a visitor behind the courtyard wall. Once she leaves, the property will finally belong to us, Celeste whispered. The father is weak. He signs whatever I place in front of him. The visitor laughed softly. And the girl, Kitala will bury her. Nobody returns from there. Amara pressed her hand against her mouth to stop herself from crying aloud. That was the moment she realized this marriage was never about survival. Celeste wanted her erased completely. Days later, Emmanuel handed Amara a small wooden box late at night while the rest of the house slept. His hands trembled violently. Your mother asked me to keep this safe until you were older. Inside rested an old silver necklace and several folded documents. Amara unfolded them carefully. Land records, bank papers, ownership certificates. Her mother's signature appeared across the bottom. What is this? She whispered. Emmanuel looked toward the door nervously before lowering his voice. Your mother owned more than I ever told anyone. Properties, investments, shares in a transportation company. Everything was placed in your name before she died. Amara stared at him in disbelief. Celeste does not know? No. He swallowed hard. But she suspects there is something hidden. That is why she wants you gone. Amara's heartbeat pounded loudly in her ears. Suddenly, every cruel comment, every manipulation, every forced smile made horrifying sense. Celeste had not simply hated her. She viewed her as an obstacle standing between herself and wealth. Why didn't you protect me? Amara asked, tears filling her eyes. Emmanuel looked older than she had ever seen him. Because I became weak after your mother died. The honesty in his voice hurt more than excuses would have. 3 mornings later, the wedding convoy arrived before sunrise. Dust rose behind old vehicles as villagers gathered outside to watch. Gideon stepped from the lead truck wearing a cream-colored suit that strained against his heavy body. Deep wrinkles lined his face. His gray beard was carefully trimmed, but his eyes looked tired and distant. He was not cruel looking. That almost made everything sadder. Celeste greeted him warmly, laughing too loudly at every sentence he spoke. Amara stood silently beneath the porch while women adjusted her veil. She felt numb, like her soul had already started leaving her body. Before the ceremony began, Gideon approached her privately. You do not wish to marry me, he said quietly. Amara looked up, startled by the gentleness in his voice. Does it matter? Gideon sighed deeply. More than you think. But before he could say anything else, Celeste appeared beside them, smiling brightly for the watching guests. The bride is simply nervous, she announced. The ceremony took place beneath a large tree beside the compound. The village elder spoke slowly, while thunderclouds gathered overhead. Amara barely heard the words. Her hand shook so badly, she nearly dropped the ceremonial cup twice. Then, just as the elder prepared to declare them husband and wife, a distant sound interrupted the silence. At first, it resembled approaching thunder, low, rhythmic, growing louder by the second. Guests turned toward the sky in confusion. Wind suddenly whipped through the trees. Dust spiraled violently across the courtyard. Children screamed and pointed upward. And then everyone saw it. A black helicopter descending from the clouds directly toward the field beside the compound. The blades roared so loudly people covered their ears. Celeste's confident smile vanished instantly. The helicopter landed with terrifying force, flattening grass beneath it, while stunned villagers stumbled backward. The door opened slowly. Two men in dark suits stepped out first. Then a tall elderly woman emerged holding a silver cane, elegant, sharp-eyed, powerful in a way that silenced the entire gathering without a single word. Emmanuel went pale the second he saw her. No, he whispered weakly. It cannot be. Amara stared in confusion as the woman walked toward the ceremony. Even Gideon looked shocked. Celeste recovered first. Excuse me, she snapped. This is a private family event. The elderly woman ignored her completely. Her eyes remained fixed on Amara. Then she spoke the words that changed everything. My granddaughter should never have been standing here at all. A stunned silence swallowed the courtyard. Amara blinked in confusion. Granddaughter? The woman stopped directly in front of her. Up close, Amara noticed the resemblance immediately. The same eyes her mother once had, the same proud posture. The woman reached slowly into her purse and removed an old photograph. In it stood a younger version of her mother, beside the same elegant woman now standing before her. "My name is Beatrice Laurent," she said calmly. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Even villagers recognized the name. Beatrice Laurent was one of the wealthiest transportation magnates in the region. Rumors about her businesses stretched across borders. She rarely appeared publicly anymore after her daughter vanished from her life years ago following a bitter family argument. Celeste's face drained of color. Emmanuel lowered his head in shame. "Your mother was my daughter," Beatrice continued softly, "and before she died, she sent me a letter." Amara's breathing became uneven. "A letter?" Beatrice nodded. "She feared for you. She feared what would happen after her death." Celeste suddenly laughed nervously. "This is absurd. Convenient timing for a dramatic appearance." One of the suited men stepped forward holding a leather folder. "We have legal documentation confirming Miss Amara Laurent as sole heir to multiple estates and corporate holdings." The crowd erupted into whispers. Celeste staggered backward slightly. "No," she whispered, "that is impossible." Beatrice's gaze hardened. "You spent years trying to isolate a child because you believed money belonged to you." The older woman's voice never rose, yet every word struck with terrifying precision. "You manipulated a grieving husband. You attempted to force an illegal marriage, and you forged signatures on property transfers." Emmanuel looked up sharply. "Forged?" One of the lawyers opened the folder carefully. Several documents transferring assets from Emmanuel Laurent to Celeste Laurent were falsified. Celeste's panic exploded instantly. "Lies!" she screamed. "She is trying to steal everything." But her voice no longer carried authority. Fear had cracked it open. Beatrice turned toward Gideon unexpectedly. "And you?" Gideon removed his hat slowly. "I know." Amara stared between them in confusion. Gideon sighed deeply before speaking. "I was hired." The entire courtyard froze again. Celeste spun toward him in horror. "What?" Gideon's tired eyes met Amara's. "3 months ago, I was approached by a woman offering money if I agreed to marry you and take you permanently to Kitala village." Murmurs spread through the guests like wildfire. Celeste backed away another step. "You promised." She stopped herself too late. Gideon nodded sadly. "Yes, you promised me land and payment after the wedding." Amara felt physically sick. Celeste looked around desperately as the truth closed around her from every direction. "You old fool," she hissed at Gideon. "You were supposed to stay quiet." "I intended to," he admitted heavily, "until I met a girl." He turned back toward Amara. "You looked terrified from the first moment I saw you. I have daughters older than you. I could not do it." Beatrice's expression softened slightly toward him. "Then why come at all?" Gideon swallowed hard. "Because your people contacted me yesterday. They offered protection if I cooperated." One of Beatrice's guards handed Emmanuel another set of papers. The old man stared at them with trembling hands. "Bank withdrawals," the lawyer explained. "Insurance transfers. Loan agreements." Emmanuel's face slowly collapsed into horror. "Celeste," she glared at him furiously. "Do not look at me like that. You were useless long before I arrived." The cruelty in her voice stunned even those who already feared her. Years of carefully performed kindness vanished instantly. "I saved this family," she continued bitterly. "Without me, you would have lost everything." "You already took everything," Emmanuel whispered. Celeste pointed toward Amara with shaking hands. "That girl was standing between me and security, between me and survival." "No," Beatrice replied coldly. "Greed was standing between you and your humanity." Rain finally began falling then, heavy drops striking the earth like warning drums. Guests hurried beneath coverings, while nobody dared leave completely. They sensed history unfolding before them. Celeste's breathing became erratic. You think this changes anything? She spat toward Amara. Do you know what happens to girls with money? People use them, betray them, destroy them. Amara stared at her through the rain. For the first time in years, fear slowly loosened its grip around her chest. Maybe, she said quietly, but at least it will not be you. Something in that answer shattered Celeste completely. She lunged suddenly toward Amara in blind rage, but the guards intercepted her instantly. The crowd gasped as she screamed insults loud enough to echo across the hills. Her polished mask was finally gone. There was only bitterness left underneath. Emmanuel sank heavily into a chair beneath the tree, covering his face with both hands. I failed her, he whispered repeatedly. Beatrice approached him slowly. Yes, she answered honestly. You did. He began crying then, not loudly, not dramatically, just the broken crying of a man finally forced to confront years of weakness. Amara watched silently while rain soaked her wedding dress completely. Strangely, she no longer cared. Gideon approached carefully. I am sorry, he said. I should never have agreed. She studied his exhausted face for a long moment before nodding slightly. Thank you for telling the truth in the end. He lowered his eyes. Sometimes old men spend too much time regretting the cowardice of their younger years. Police vehicles arrived less than an hour later. By then, half the district had already heard rumors about the helicopter wedding scandal. Celeste was escorted away screaming that everyone would regret betraying her, but nobody moved to defend her anymore. Not even Emmanuel, especially not Emmanuel. As the vehicles disappeared down the muddy road, silence settled over the ruined ceremony. Beatrice turned toward Amara gently. Come home with me. Amara hesitated. I do not even know you. Pain flickered across the older woman's face. That is my greatest shame. Later that evening, Amara stood inside the helicopter while village lights faded beneath them. For the first time in years, she felt the terrifying, unfamiliar sensation of possibility. Beatrice sat across from her quietly before finally speaking. Your mother believed you would become extraordinary. Tears filled Amara's eyes again. Then why did she leave you? Beatrice looked out the window at the storm clouds surrounding them. Because I once behaved exactly like Celeste. The confession hung heavily between them. I valued status more than love. Your mother married your father against my wishes. I said terrible things to her. Pride stole years from us. Her voice cracked softly. By the time I tried to repair things, she was already dying. Amara listened silently. The letter she sent before her death, Beatrice continued. It said only one thing mattered. What? Beatrice looked directly at her. That you never become bitter because of what others did to you. Amara cried quietly then, not from sadness alone, but from exhaustion, from survival, from finally hearing love spoken without manipulation attached to it. Months later, newspapers across the region covered the scandal extensively. Fraud investigations destroyed everything Celeste had built through deception. The properties she tried to steal were reclaimed legally. Emmanuel voluntarily surrendered control of all remaining assets connected to Amara's inheritance. He moved into a small countryside home alone after publicly admitting his failures. Sometimes he wrote letters begging forgiveness. Sometimes Amara answered. Sometimes she could not. Healing moved slowly, like sunrise after endless rain. Gideon returned to Kitala village and used the payment Beatrice offered him to build a school beside the old farming fields. He never married again. People said he spoke often about honesty during the final years of his life. As for Amara, she eventually returned to university, not because wealth demanded it, but because freedom finally allowed her choices. She traveled beside Beatrice across cities her mother once dreamed of showing her. And though that relationship began awkwardly, slowly it transformed into something real, something healing. One evening, years later, Amara stood on the balcony of a high rise building overlooking thousands of glowing city lights while storm clouds rolled softly across the horizon. Beatrice joined her quietly. Do you still think about that day? She asked. Amara smiled faintly. Sometimes. What do you remember most? Amara looked toward the dark sky where distant thunder murmured gently. The sound of the helicopter. Beatrice laughed softly. Not the scandal, not Celeste screaming. Amara shook her head slowly. No. Her eyes drifted upward thoughtfully. I remember realizing my life was not ending after all. It was finally beginning.